On this Monday night, a rare and very public ultimatum aimed at Vladimir Putin. UK Prime Minister Theresa May says it is highly likely Russia is responsible for the poisoning of a former spy, a chemical attack on British soil, and she wants an explanation or else. So, how could the UK retaliate?
Also tonight, Saskatoon police take an extraordinary step in the fight against fentanyl.
And the global water crisis. Our special coverage begins tonight in Cape Town. The National starts right now.
By design or by accident, Britain's Prime Minister says Moscow was definitely involved in that poisoning attack in Salisbury. Either way, as Thomas Degler reports, Britain wants answers from Russia fast.
A cleanup and investigation as delicate as it is striking to see. At its source, a nerve agent revealed today to be Soviet-era and military grade.
Statement, the Prime Minister.
After a week of pressure to blame Russia, today Theresa May went all in, pointing to what she called Moscow's record of conducting state-sponsored assassinations.
That it is highly likely that Russia was responsible for the act against Sergei and Yulia Skripal.
The two remain in critical condition. Scientists at Britain's military labs identified the chemical used on them as a Novichok, a nerve agent rarely seen.
It was an indiscriminate and reckless act against the United Kingdom, putting the lives of innocent civilians at risk.
To some, the use by Russia of a chemical weapon speaks volumes.
Because we've done nothing about the huge amount of use in Syria, if it is Mr. Putin, he might be feeling that he can use chemical weapons, but nobody's going to do anything about it.
Russian officials have denied involvement, and touring a grain facility earlier in the day, President Putin responded in his own way.
Is Russia behind the poisoning of Sergei Skripal?
Listen, he said, we're dealing with agriculture here, and you're talking about some tragedies. Get to the bottom of things there first, then we'll discuss this.
It has nothing to do with Putin.
Valery Morozov blames others. A fellow exile, he had met Skripal and thinks he'd been targeted now because of recent contacts with both Russians and the British intelligence community.
Somebody has conflict with or is interested in assassination of Skripal, but I think it is because of his recent activities.
The Prime Minister is giving the Russian ambassador until tomorrow to explain what really happened. Then on Wednesday, the government here at Westminster will decide what action to take in response, from expelling diplomats and ramping up sanctions to freezing assets. Thomas Dagler, CBC News, London.
As for prosecuting anyone for the attack on the Skripals, let's just say that people in Britain are not getting their hopes up. Remember the death of Alexander Litvinenko? His tea was poisoned with radioactive polonium-210 in London in 2006. But despite evidence, 2 former KGB agents were involved and arrest warrants issued for them, Britain's request for their extradition was flatly turned down. One, Dmitry Kovtun, is now a wealthy businessman in Russia. The other, Andrei Lugovoy, is a member of the Duma, Russia's parliament. Now, the poison used in this latest attack was a Novichok. That's a class of nerve agents that Russia started developing during the Cold War, engineered to be undetectable. They're made from non-toxic components that, when mixed, become an active nerve agent. They can be dispersed as an ultra-fine powder as opposed to a gas or a vapor, and they're usually inhaled. They can also be absorbed through the skin or the mucous membranes. And like other nerve agents, they cause the entire nervous system to shut down, leading to heart failure or suffocation. And one final haunting fact, Novichoks are specifically designed to resist standard nerve agent antidotes. And Andrew, one more note on this. U.S. Secretary of State said late tonight that he believes the UK's assessment that Russia was involved and that those responsible should face serious consequences.
All right, Adrian. Let's turn now to another world leader under pressure tonight, Canada's. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's campaign to head off a trade war with the United States, it went into overdrive today. He unleashed a full-on charm offensive on American TV, and he was singing a familiar tune.
We have always been incredibly integrated. Our Canadian aluminum is in your fighter jets. Canadian steel is in your tanks. There is no better security partner in the world to the United States than Canada is. So that whole issue of national security is simply off the table. And we can work together in ways that benefits steel workers and aluminum workers on both sides of the border.
The Prime Minister with CNN's Anderson Cooper earlier this evening. And as Katie Simpson tells us, what Trudeau said there is all part of the strategy, a simple message for people on both sides of the border. We're on the same side.
On the front lines of the looming trade war, the Prime Minister offered what reassurances he could to the workers who are trapped in a cycle of uncertainty.
We will continue to pull out all the stops to get the best possible results for Canadians and their families. We had your backs last week, and we always will.
Justin Trudeau is taking that sentiment to aluminum and steel factories across the country. But his message may not resonate unless the temporary exemption from new American tariffs on both metals becomes permanent. Trudeau called Donald Trump today to discuss the issue.
Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau joins us.
And on U.S. cable news, he made a broader pitch for American support while pledging to crack down further on cheap Chinese steel that undermines U.S. producers.
So we've put in very strong measures, some of the strongest in the world, against dumping. But as I said to the President, as I said to congressional leadership, I'm happy to work with the United States to go even further with them.
But Trudeau will not go any further with Trump's suggestion tariffs should be linked to NAFTA talks.
Canada's brutal. Canada's really tough.
Over the weekend, Trump repeated his threat to hit Canada and Mexico with those levies unless they agree to his NAFTA demands.
The president wants to try to get any advantage he can. He's trying to get the attention of our trading partners, and I think he's succeeded at getting people's attention.
Trump certainly has the attention of the world, but there are warnings he must tread carefully.
The risk, of course, is that he goes too far and really triggers a trade war or a retaliation sequence of events that he can't put back.
Canada has not made public threats of retaliation yet, but Trudeau hinted that may change, suggesting the government is considering its next moves. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Ottawa.
Of course, much has been said about how Trump's chief target is China. The way Trump tells it, the U.S. is drowning in Chinese steel. But is there much truth to that?
We can't continue to allow China to rape our country.
The president has long blasted China, the world's biggest steel producer, for running U.S. manufacturers out of business.
We're going to bring back our jobs.
His tough talk on tariffs goes as far back as 2011, specifically challenging China.
Listen, you mother, we're going to tax you 25%.
But China's Iron and Steel Association says the new duties would have little impact. Why? More than 90% of steel from China is already subject to special tariffs. So the country has shipped less and less steel to the U.S. in recent years. Now they account for only about 2% of U.S. steel imports, which is far behind traditional U.S. allies like Canada, Brazil, and South Korea.
And we're going to be instituting tariffs.
Trump's tough talk seems to have risked damaging valuable trade relationships. What it likely won't hurt, the intended target, China's steel industry. But Ian, back to news here in Canada and an extremely unusual decision from Saskatoon police.
Andrew, after a string of fentanyl-related overdose deaths over the weekend, police publicly released the identity and the phone number of an alleged drug dealer.
We're asking the public that if somebody has purchased cocaine from a person using the street name of either Little Joe or Joe Bro, or from a person using the cell phone number, to contact the Saskatoon Police Service so that we can properly dispose of the substance. The Saskatoon Police Service is not searching to pursue any charges. We're only interested in the health and safety of the public.
So they released that phone number, and it's a move that pits two fundamental values against each other, privacy and public safety. Saskatoon police say they did not make the decision lightly. They say it was necessary, and Olivia Stefanovic takes a closer look.
I mean, this is what I refer to as the addiction apocalypse. Rand Teed has been weaning people off drugs for more than 4 decades. In that time, he says he's never seen police respond to a string of overdoses quite like this.
I mean, drug dealers aren't part of the Better Business Bureau, so letting people know that there are very specific, significant risks, I think is a good idea.
6 people overdosed in Saskatoon over the weekend after taking a suspected mix of cocaine laced with fentanyl. 2 died, and that's what prompted this unprecedented move for Saskatoon police. They were very clear that they wanted anyone who bought those drugs to bring them in, destroy them, otherwise get rid of them.
I didn't believe that that would ever happen, where somebody who's not convicted would be pointed out so specifically.
Cora Gorari heads an outreach center. She knows several people killed by fentanyl.
Nobody wants to see anybody wrongly accused, but at the same time, I think once in a while you have to choose between the lesser of evils, and in this case, this is the lesser of evil.
Teed says fentanyl can cause people to instantly overdose, but he says people often cut it in drugs to increase the amount they have to sell and the effect.
Somebody takes that, they're going to have a strong response to it, so they'll initially feel like, well, they got a good deal.
Statistics from Saskatchewan's chief coroner show opioid-related deaths are trending downwards, but the latest spike in overdoses has set off alarms. Police haven't confirmed if they have the drug dealer known as Little Joe or Joe Bro in custody, but they do say they've arrested 3 people in connection for trafficking.
What I can tell you is that since the arrest, we've had no more calls of fentanyl overdoses. We believe we have the right people in custody.
Investigators are now considering whether other charges, including manslaughter, are warranted. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Regina.
It is unusual for police to charge someone with manslaughter in a fentanyl-related death, but not unprecedented. Edmonton police laid their first manslaughter charge against an alleged drug dealer in October 2016 after a young man died of a fentanyl overdose. A pre-trial conference for that case is scheduled for this August. And in early 2015, a southern Alberta man was charged with manslaughter after 2 of his friends died from fentanyl that he gave them at a party. Those charges, though, were dropped when he pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of trafficking fentanyl. He was sentenced to 9 months in jail. It was a day of aggravation for a lot of Air Canada passengers around the world. For the second time in less than a month, there were long lines and frustration. A lot of frustration. Air Canada's explanation? It was a computer and telecommunications issue on a busier than normal travel day.
We're just hearing overhead announcements that they have a systems downtime, and they'll notify us when it's back up again.
I gotta now rebook my flights and everything, and then it's just a bit chaotic here and stuff.
It wasn't just big lineups, but also delays. This was the scene in Toronto, but the impact was felt across the country and internationally. On the first day of March break for many Canadians, it wasn't just at airports. Here's what a lot of people saw as they tried to check in online. So Air Canada apparently went old school. Here's a boarding pass. One passenger said that he was issued. By mid-afternoon, the airline said the problem was addressed, but urged customers to check their flights before heading to the airport. Not clear what caused the breakdown, but an airline analyst told us he wasn't surprised, considering Air Canada's aging computer system.
With these kind of legacy systems, they're computer systems which elements have been around for a number of years typically, and millions of lines of code where they get very complex over time, and it may well lead to problems.
Tonight, Air Canada tells us the system has returned to normal, but there may be some lingering effects into the morning.
So what can all those angry passengers do? Well, in the EU, you might get some money back. So once a flight departing from anywhere in the EU is delayed for more than 3 hours, passengers might be entitled to compensation if the airline can't prove that the delay was caused by, extraordinary circumstances.
And you may be wondering, what about those of us here in Canada? Well, we await the promised passenger Bill of Rights, and we wait to see how it might address delays like the ones we saw today.
Right. And here's what else we're working on tonight on The National. The Bare Naked Ladies are coming back for one night only. Hear from the band as they prepare to reunite with Stephen Page for the upcoming Junos.
Taking the temperature in one of Ontario's bellwether ridings, we head to Scarborough to find out what they think of newly elected PC leader Doug Ford.
And we start a CBC News special series into global water shortages, starting in the city facing down day zero, the day Cape Town runs out of water.
Mr. Ramaphosa, we're from Canada, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask you, what does it mean for a country like South Africa to have a city like Cape Town on the verge of losing its water?
Well, it's a total disaster for us. It shows the impact, the negative impact of climate change.
Tonight's the national documentary from Cape Town coming up on The National.
On The National tonight, New York's Metropolitan Opera has fired world-famous conductor James Levine over sex abuse claims. He had been suspended last December, but in a statement today, the Met said it's investigated and found credible evidence that he engaged in sexually abusive and harassing conduct. 4 men accused Levine of abusing them when they were young musicians. Levine has denied the allegations. The RCMP has a new tool at its disposal, a national DNA database, to be able to better identify human remains whenever they're found. A family member of a missing person could, in theory, hand over something like a toothbrush, and the DNA would be accessible countrywide.
The benefit's going to be that if her remains are found anywhere across Canada, that I will know, and then also that the National DNA Databank can liaise with the United States.
Judy Peterson is a BC mom who's been searching for her daughter since 1993. She's been pushing for this, and the legislation that made the program possible is called Lindsay's Law, named after her daughter. We need to set the record straight about a story we brought you last week. It examined the RCMP investigation into Colton Bushy's shooting death. Now, we reported that police did not take the accused's statement until the day after the shooting. Now, while that is true, new information shows that he wasn't released before giving his statement, as we had reported. We also said there was no indication his clothing was seized, but the new information shows that it was. We did contact the RCMP prior to our reporting, but they had declined to comment on these specific issues.
Doug Ford won the Ontario PC leadership race in dramatic fashion, and today he says he's ready to move on to take on Kathleen Wynne's Liberals.
We're going to win areas that have never went PC before. Hamilton, Windsor, Thunder Bay. We're going to win those ridings because people want hope. People that belong to the NDP and Liberals that came up to me said, Doug, I'm voting for you, which is great.
Well, you heard it there. Ford is looking to capture seats held by his opponents. Take the case of Scarborough in East Toronto. The Liberals have held 2 ridings there for 15 years. So could change be on the way? Ron Charles went to find out.
In Scarborough, June's election won't be an easy skate to victory for the Liberals. They may find their ice here has thinned. That's because in much of this sprawling community, part old suburb, part new home to new Canadians, the name Ford is genuinely loved.
What I just know from what my people them say about Rob Ford and the Doug Fords, they're good people. They're for the people.
The late Rob Ford may have made headlines around the world for all the wrong reasons, but people in Scarborough remember him as the Toronto mayor who favored them over the downtown elites. In his own losing bid for mayor, Doug Ford won 9 of Scarborough's 10 city wards.
Good morning.
Rennie Rampersad is such a Ford fan that he's teaching his pet parrots to say his name.
I know Doug Ford is a good guy, man. Rob Ford, you know, they're good, yeah, good guy. They are for the, for the poor, man.
Parrots Pauline and Grace aren't the only ones in Scarborough who will be singing Ford's name.
He's down to earth. He's not a snob. These other, I won't mention the other ones, but they're so high and muddy.
But some people need to hear more substance from Ford.
I think he's fair. So, but I still need to understand more of his policies.
Whether swayed by policy or personality, the Scarborough ridings are in play. Ron Charles, CBC News, Toronto.
Next on The National, we begin a special CBC News series about the world's water. We take you to Cape Town, South Africa, where they're just waiting for the day they run out.
I started seeing the queues. No, it was fine. But then I started seeing fights in queues. Then I realized we've got a problem. And that made me sit back and realize that not many of us are ready for the possibility of day zero.
Cape Town looks a lot like paradise, but take a closer look and you'll see why it may be paradise lost. A landscape parched by drought and people wondering if they'll have enough to drink. Tonight we begin our special coverage there. Water is essential to life, but maintaining a safe supply of it is one of the greatest challenges facing the world today. Where to find it, how to clean it, and who in divided societies across the globe gets it. This week, CBC News and The National are exploring this vital resource. Access to clean drinking water has been a problem for parts of the world for a long time. Now the danger is our cities, quote, running out of water. But water isn't actually disappearing, it's shifting. Places that need water aren't getting it, places that don't sometimes get too much. And for some, what's within reach is dangerous. Climate change, pollution, poor planning, all driving a water scarcity worldwide. And that's creating a new crisis for everyone. It's dubbed water stress. And this is what that looks like. All these countries are at risk of using more water than their supply can replenish in a year. It's a crisis the UN says affects more than 2 billion people. So tonight, we zero in on the coastal tip of South Africa where they're being told to use less water or risk catastrophe. Margaret Evans shows us how people, rich and poor, are coping in Cape Town.
Cape Town, the mother city. It clambers up the base of Table Mountain like an offering. And when the mountain sends its clouds tumbling over the edge to meet it, it can feel like a city that's floating. Hovering over 2 oceans, all seeing. It is one of the most beautiful places on the planet, and one of the most unequal. And it's running out of water. Newlands is one of Cape Town's oldest suburbs, an upmarket neighborhood lying in the shadow of the mountain and benefiting from one of the underground springs running beneath it. Its quiet affluence has been disturbed of late by the constant sound of trolleys being dragged along the street, the young men pulling them for tips, nicknamed the city's new Uber drivers. The dams feeding Cape Town's water grid are now less than a quarter full, and people have been told to limit what they use from the taps to 50 liters per person per day, or watch the city run dry.
No water goes down the drain. At least we can reuse it or recycle it. You know, your grey water, your shower water. I mean, your baths, whew, that's a thing of the way past, you know.
So it is helping us because we don't drink from the tap water anymore since the dam levels are very low.
The spring water is clean, drinkable, and for now, free. Last year was one of the driest on record here in the midst of a 3-year drought that officials say was impossible to predict. But when a city as big as this comes as close as this to running out of water, people want answers. And those who can afford it are simply taking matters into their own hands. The new kings of industry in Cape Town are the borehole drillers, digging down deep in search of groundwater, transforming back gardens into muddy tableaus of endeavor. Marietta Dovell owns a guest house. She's taking a gamble they'll hit water so she can remove herself from the municipal grid. Relying on the city to keep the water flowing or her fellow citizens to save enough is too risky for a business like hers, she says.
I have 22 staff that works for me, and they all breadwinners. So I cannot close my doors. And if I don't have water, I can't have a guest. It's as simple as that.
The guest house is already conservation friendly. Recycled water fills the pool, waters the plants, cleans the floors, and flushes the toilets.
I shower once a week when I wash my hair. For the rest, I wash in a bucket every morning, like most of South Africans, like most of Africa does. It's a leveler.
Yes and no. The wealthy, after all, will still be able to drill or buy bottled water, or even pay people to stand in line for them if it comes down to rationing. One thing is clear. Everyone in Cape Town is talking about that apocalyptic date on the horizon known as Day Zero. The subject is impossible to avoid at dinner parties, in the supermarkets, even at the beach.
Ketso Sajane on Cape Talk, your #1 news and talk station.
What else are you doing to save water?
Well, I switched from using an ordinary towel to a hand towel, which gives you less bulk for your laundry.
Yeah, it is all about saving water.
Koketso Sajani is a host with Cape Talk, a popular call-in show. He's spent a lot of time listening to people's concerns about the crisis, from who to blame to when to flush.
If it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, let it drown. Yeah, that. It's a mess. It's terrible. I hate it.
Joking aside, Sajani doesn't believe many Cape Townians have yet understood the gravity of the situation, and he worries about what might happen when they do, especially amongst the supposedly well-heeled.
I started seeing the queues. No, it was fine. But then I started seeing fights in queues. Then I realized we've got a problem. And that made me sit back and realize that not many of us are ready for the possibility of Day Zero.
Apartheid might have officially ended nearly 30 years ago, but Cape Town is a city still very much divided along racial lines, sprawling black townships segregated from white suburbs. Sajani says people of privilege can forget that standing in line for water is simply a way of life for many South Africans.
That's what people do every day. That source happens to be a well, happens to be a tap. That's what they do every day.
Never mind a Day Zero, he says. They've never had a Day One.
President Ramaphosa has invited you to join him on his morning walk, to start at about 5:30 a.m.
When we get there.
Okay, let's go.
Guguletu, one of the townships. And true to his word, South Africa's new president, Cyril Ramaphosa, is out walking along with an army of supporters, marching through still dreaming streets, the media trailing behind.
So everybody wants to be fit here, like me.
Mr. Ramaphosa, we're from Canada, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask you, what does it mean for a country like South Africa to have a city like Cape Town on the verge of losing its water?
Well, it's a total disaster for us. It shows the impact, the negative impact of climate change.
One of Ramaphosa's first acts as president was to praise Cape Town for saving water. But the real water crisis, he says, lives with the city's poor.
They are really on the margins of society, and they are the ones whose interests we've got to safeguard more than the rich people who live in the northern suburbs.
The Cape Flats, home to the mother city's huddled masses. In the 1950s, they called them the dumping grounds. Non-whites forced out of the city center into townships, hemmed in. And hemmed in, many remain today, trapped by the poverty they were born into. water in this informal settlement comes from a communal tap provided by the city. Sibusiso Nozegweb moved here from the Eastern Cape in search of work. He lives with his wife in this small, impeccable shack, water stored in pails for drinking and bathing. Communal toilets, he says, are foul and risky.
You must go down there during the night. You see something like this, so it's not safe at the end of the day. It's not safe.
The townships and the informal settlements combined account for just 4% of all of Cape Town's water use.
They are telling us that we must use water wisely, you see, but they are using to irrigate in front of their houses, you see, something like that.
Ironically, the Cape Flats lie above one of the big aquifers scientists hope may help resolve the city's water problems in the future. The city is testing its depth. They need alternatives. Without them, experts agree, Cape Town will face an unrecognizable future. The landscape is already shifting to accommodate it. These tidal pools about to share the beach with a desalination plant, one of 3 temporary facilities under urgent construction. The city council, run by the opposition Democratic Alliance, has been at pains to show it's handling the crisis, trying to shake off criticism. Opponents say introducing the concept of Day Zero prompted unnecessary panic. Councillor Xanthia Limburg says the city needed a jolt.
We believe that it was important for communities to understand that there's a direct correlation between their consumption and what that means for our overall supply. And this is why we believed it was important to communicate the urgency of that Day Zero messaging.
Even now, with all the warnings, more than half of Cape Town's residents are ignoring the 50 litres a day guidelines. And precious police resources in a crime-ridden city are being diverted to fight water wasters.
You only drink this water now? No, only drink.
Teams like this one tackle car washes tapping into the municipal grid. And they respond to calls from people reporting their neighbors for watering lawns.
Where they're using bore to wash vehicles.
Or turning borehole water into an illegal business.
So for now you have to stop.
If they don't police it now, say authorities, Day Zero will indeed arrive. Take a stroll along Cape Town's famed waterfront, and it can feel as though you might have dreamt it all. This, after all, doesn't look or feel like a city in the midst of a national emergency. But it is. And even if Cape Town manages to avoid Day Zero this year, scientists say to push it firmly from the horizon will require a far greater act of will, a psychological shift in how people relate to water. For those who live in areas where the value of it has long been known by its absence, the hope is different. The hope is that shift might go a little further to include their reality as well. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Cape Town.
So how hard would it be for you to get by on the water rations like they have in Cape Town? Let's just say it would be an adjustment. A reminder, people in Cape Town are supposed to limit personal water use to 50 litres per day. The average Canadian uses 5 times that amount, 250 litres a day, according to the latest figures. It's an improvement from 8 years earlier, when average daily use here was 330 litres. There's one hint why Canada is seen as a country of water wasters. At the same time, it's blessed with incredible water resources. Tomorrow, our special series looks at the risk of shortages right here. How bad could things actually get?
You know, the snow helps, but in the severe drought, it's not enough. And we need rain as well. And this was proven last year in Canada.
So what we're seeing in Cape Town this year, could that happen here?
It's not impossible that it can.
Tonight on The National, a deadly plane crash at Kathmandu's airport in Nepal, and authorities trying to sort out exactly why it happened. The Bangladeshi airliner was trying to land when it swerved, crashed, and burst into flames. Of the 71 people on board, 49 were killed. The airline says the air traffic control gave their pilot the wrong instructions, but the airport disputes that. They say the pilot didn't respond to their messages and approached from the wrong direction. In Austin, police are investigating a series of deadly explosions that appear to be linked. All three cases involve package bombs being left outside a home, and police are looking into whether race was a factor, as all the victims were minorities. The first attack 10 days ago killed a man. Then today, 2 more bombs exploded at homes within just a few kilometers of each other. A teenager was killed and 2 others were injured.
Obviously, there's the possibility that these are related. So if you find any suspicious packages on your front porch at your residence, do not handle them.
As for the bombs themselves, in all cases, police don't think they went through regular mail channels. They think they were likely left on doorsteps overnight. Well, the battle to influence the U.S. president is perpetual. And in this, it appears the NRA has won yet another fight. They've persuaded President Donald Trump to back off his recent promise to raise age restrictions for buying assault rifles. And as Paul Hunter tells us, instead, Trump is back to endorsing another controversial idea, arming teachers.
Think American teachers shy away from guns in the classroom? Consider this training course, free for faculty members, this weekend in Texas. And fresh from teaching grade 3 math, Kim Rainey.
It's scary sometimes. We do our best to, have security at our schools, but you never know what's going to happen.
The steps for this are going to be tap, rack, and ready.
Firearms training for teachers is a key part of the new White House proposal on gun laws.
The president's plan focuses on the following areas. First, hardening our schools.
Tougher background checks for gun buyers is another aspect, but missing from the plan is any real push for raising the minimum age for buying military-styled semi-automatic rifles, the so-called weapon of choice for mass shooters. Raising the age from 18 to 21 is fiercely opposed by the NRA, but pushed by Trump himself just last month.
Are you going to 21 or not?
Chastising lawmakers who resisted.
You know why? Because you're afraid of the NRA, right?
Now Trump himself stands accused of caving.
Looks to me like the president is scared of the NRA. That is shameful. We need leadership from the president.
On contentious changes to gun laws broadly, Trump's effectively tossed it to state governments and a federal commission for study, even though just this weekend, when talking of the opioid crisis, he mocked such commissions as useless.
We can't just keep setting up blue ribbon committees.
Said Trump's choice to now conduct one of those on guns.
We have to go back to the beginning and talk about how these violent acts are even occurring to start with.
Even with Trump's proposals, it's ultimately up to the U.S. Congress to pass legislation. On Capitol Hill, there's lately been talk of that, but little else. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
Wednesday marks 1 month since the Parkland school shooting, and young people across the country will be using the day to demand stronger action on gun violence. The idea for students and teachers to leave their classrooms at 10 a.m. for 17 minutes. That's 1 minute for each victim. But while many schools have given their students permission to participate, others have forbidden it, citing safety concerns, and they're threatening to punish those who walk out. It all ramps up to another large protest being organized by Parkland survivors themselves for March 24th in Washington, D.C., the so-called March for Our Lives.
We don't need your racist wall. We reject your hate.
To protests underway today, this was a scene in San Diego where people were not welcoming Donald Trump. The president is expected to visit the Golden State tomorrow for the first time since being elected 16 months ago. And his first order of business will be to inspect 8 different prototypes of his proposed border wall. That is not expected to win him many favors. California, one of the most diverse states in the country, the majority reliably Democrat, and it's home of the so-called resistance movement. And right now, that resistance is fighting Trump over illegal immigration. CBC's Kim Brunhuber explains.
I have experience in construction. I've been doing scaffold building for about 10 years now.
The irony is, Eddie Estrada is scared of heights, terrified.
That's something I'd be interested in. I always want.
But for $17.34 an hour plus benefits, the 32-year-old is willing to swing from the scaffolding like a lemur.
And if anybody likes to work outdoors?
Companies are hiring up to 2,000 workers to renovate Memorial Coliseum. So Estrada says he's hoping to help build America and build a better life for his family. And these days, he's less worried about falling from a great height than he is falling afoul of federal immigration agents, which he says have been suddenly active in LA.
You have people coming over here because, I mean, that's the American dream, right? You come for a better life, and then they're being placed up against the wall now.
Many at this construction job fair are undocumented, like Ecuador's Homero Ayala.
Ese es el problema, que no hay papeles.
And he says they're caught in the middle of the latest war between D.C. and California.
Stop the deportations!
The reason? The state's new sanctuary laws. If any of these workers are arrested by police and they're undocumented, they won't be turned over to immigration officials unless they've committed a serious crime, and employers have to give workers 72 hours notice before their workplace is inspected by immigration.
We're getting no help from the state of California.
President Trump has expressed his displeasure. And as if in response, says Carpenter Eduardo Sauceda, immigration raids have increased.
They wait at 7-Elevens, they go to the Walmarts, and they try to fish in who they can.
Now, U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions is challenging California's sanctuary laws in court. But immigration lawyer Jean Reese says the state is on firm legal ground as long as it doesn't actively hinder federal immigration.
The argument that the state has to bend to whatever will the federal government wants to impose is not a right founded in the Constitution.
Keep Cal safe.
They see things differently here in Whittier, 30 kilometers southeast of Los Angeles.
Fight back against all the crime and mayhem going on in Southern California now.
At this rally to support anti-crime legislation, they speak with one voice: no sanctuary.
Sanctuary in what terms? You know, you have to ask yourself, what exactly does that mean? Does that mean harboring and protecting criminals?
I think good for Sessions finally. He's stepping out and doing what the American people want.
Trump's attorney general is also getting support from many in the law enforcement community. California's new laws, they say, mean most criminals who are here illegally just get released right back onto the streets.
The label of the sanctuary cities, I think it's more for law enforcement the perspective of that it's become taboo to even do your job.
Do your job. That's all these applicants say they want.
Awesome. You know, put your name and information down for me.
Forget Sessions, forget sanctuary. They just want to work.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Kim Brunhuber, CBC News, Los Angeles.
The Bare Naked Ladies are reuniting with former frontman Stephen Page for one performance only. The Juno Awards on March 25th. This comes 9 years after Page left the band following a drug arrest in New York State in 2008.
For me, I'm not looking at it like, you know, this is time to like rehash everything, or like, I'm just going for the celebration.
David Commons sat down with the current band members. We'll bring you that interview in the coming days on The National. The royal family marked Commonwealth Day at a service in London today, and all eyes, and of course all cameras, were on Meghan Markle as she made her most important public appearance to date.
Today, of course, will be her first official engagement in the company of the Queen.
Meghan Markle walked into Westminster Abbey with her fiancé, Prince Harry, and the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. The Queen arrived moments later. In just 2 months, Markle will officially become part of the royal family. She already appears to be settling right into her new role. More than 2,000 people attended the multi-faith event celebrating the Commonwealth.
We're waiting on the world to change. Just like the breeze.
Plenty of performances and a procession of flags from all 53 countries of the alliance.
I moved to Canada about 9 years ago, so to be carrying the Canadian flag as someone of Indian origin really meant a lot to me as well. It's so exciting to be part of such a grand occasion and to see the whole royal family there.
The plan is for Prince Harry to take an official leadership role within the Commonwealth. And once married, the royal couple intend to launch projects aimed at helping youth in Commonwealth countries.
Well, Canada is hosting the Belgian royals this week. Governor-General Julie Payette welcomed King Philippe and Queen Mathilde in the capital today. And it's the first state visit of its kind in 40 years. But day one got off to a bit of an awkward start. Now, can you spot the problem here? A Belgian journalist did and caught the mix-up. That is our moment of the day.
The Governor-General thought it would be interesting to mark this tree, so our King and Queen could see this tree, but they made a mistake. They mixed up the Belgian flag with the German one, and I can understand what happened. The Belgian flag and the German flag, they have the same colors, black, yellow and red, but the combination is different. We took pictures and videos of the removal about the mistake, so it went on social media, newspapers wrote about it on websites. This cannot happen because a state visit is the most important protocol event, so everything has to be well prepared, and you can mix up at that moment the Belgian flag with the German flag.
So you better believe the Belgian media was on that like that. But the foreign minister, who's part of the delegation, was really pretty unfazed by this faux pas. He said, you know, as you heard there, the colors are the same. Belgium has a close relationship with Germany, so you know, this mix-up isn't an issue. Very diplomatic.
So very diplomatic. Also was Rideau Hall apologizing for the incident. They said they fixed it prior to the arrival of the royals.
Well, good thing, good timing at least. And before anyone gets a little too smug about all this, it wasn't too hard for us to find other examples of flags gone wrong. There was this House of Cards moment from last March. Sean Spicer wearing his flag pin upside down. And, well, lest you think Canada's flag is immune, 1992 World Series. Whoops.
Yeah, there's upside down, there's wrong flags, there's when reporters on our network talk about lieutenant as opposed to lieutenant. I mean, there's just lots of things that can catch you up, and these days with social media, you get caught up immediately. Anyway, that is the National for Monday, March the 12th. Nice to be back from vacation. Good night.
Good night.
Nice to have you back. Good night.